Hello everyone. Today we are going to study about impact on ocean ecosystem. So the impact of human activities and other ongoing environmental changes, what is its impact on ocean ecosystem? From ocean acidification to coral bleaching, we are going to discuss that. So under this topic, we will discuss about ocean acidification, its impact, its effects, biological and non-biological impact, coral bleaching, impact, and what can be done to stop this or mitigate this. So let's start. What is ocean acidification? Ocean acidification is the ongoing decrease in the pH of Earth's ocean, which is caused by the uptake of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. And the seawater is slightly basic in nature. So for the basic, the pH should be greater than 7, and ocean acidification involves a shift towards pH neutral condition rather than a transition to acidic conditions. So an estimated 30 to 40% of carbon dioxide from human activity which is released into atmosphere, it dissolves into oceans, rivers and lakes. So to achieve chemical equilibrium, some of it reacts with the water to form carbonic acid. Some of the resulting carbonic acid molecules, they dissociate into bicarbonate ion and a hydrogen ion, thus increasing the ocean acidity, that is increasing the H positive ion concentration in the oceans. Earth system models project that within the last decade, ocean acidity exceeded historical analogues, and in combination with other ocean biogeochemical changes, it could undermine the functioning of marine ecosystems also, and it can disrupt the provision of many goods and services associated with the ocean beginning as early as 2100. So increasing acidity is thought to have a range of potential harmful consequences for marine organisms, such as there could be depressing metabolic rates, immune responses, and some organisms, and causing coral bleaching also. So however, about coral bleaching we will study separately also in this lecture. By increasing the presence of free hydrogen ions, the additional carbonic acid that forms in the oceans ultimately results in the conversion of carbonate ions into bicarbonate ions. Ocean alkalinity is not changed by process or may increase over long periods due to carbonate dissolution. So this net decrease in the amount of carbonate ions available make it more difficult for marine calcifying organisms. Now this ongoing ocean acidification that we are talking about is partially anthropogenic in nature also. That means it is because of the man or human activities. It occurred previously also in Earth's history. Even this ocean acidification, it has been compared to anthropogenic climatic change, which is called evil twin of global warming. That means this is equally dangerous as global warming. This is twin for the global warming. And the other CO2 problem, carbon dioxide problem, freshwater bodies also appear to be acidifying, although this is more complex and less obvious phenomena. Now we will talk about carbon cycle. Now see, the carbon cycle describes the fluxes of carbon dioxide between oceans and the terrestrial biosphere, lithosphere and atmosphere. Human activities such as combustion or fossil fuel burning and land use changes have led to new flux of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. That means the concentration of carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere. About 45% has remained in the atmosphere. Most of the rest has been taken up by ocean. So as the concentration of carbon dioxide increases in the atmosphere, the increasing amount is equally absorbed by the oceans also, with some taken up by terrestrial plants. Now see, the carbon cycle, it involves both organic compounds and, for example, cellulose, and inorganic carbon compounds such as carbon dioxide, carbonate ion and bicarbonate ion. The inorganic compounds are particularly relevant when discussing ocean acidification, for they include many forms of dissolved carbon dioxide present in Earth's ocean. When carbon dioxide dissolves, it reacts with water to form balance of ionic and non-ionic chemical species dissolved free carbon dioxide. So from the atmosphere, here it is absorbed by the oceans also, organic, anorganic, particulate matter, it gets dissolved, sedimentation and deep water circulation you can see in this picture. Now talking about acidification, dissolving carbon dioxide in seawater, it increases the hydrogen ion concentration in the ocean and thus decreases ocean's pH, such as you can see carbon dioxide plus water. So it is a carbonic acid, then it is splitting up into the ions, bicarbonate ions, and ultimately H positive ions, which is increasing the acidification of the ocean. Some of the industrial revolution even began. The ocean has absorbed about 1/3 of the carbon dioxide we have produced since industrial revolution, and it is estimated that surface ocean pH has dropped slightly more than 0.1 units on the logarithmic scale of pH, representing about 29% increase in H positive ions. It is expected to drop further by 0.3 to 0.5 pH units by 2100 as the oceans absorbs more anthropogenic carbon dioxide. The impacts being most severe for coral reefs and southern ocean. So these changes are predicted to accelerate as more anthropogenic carbon dioxide is released to the atmosphere and taken up by the oceans. So the degree of change to ocean chemistry, including the pH, will depend upon the mitigation and emissions pathways taken up by the society, how fast our society reacts to these changes. Now, what is the impact? Increasing acidity has possibly harmful consequences such as depressing metabolic rates in jumbo squid. In many animals, the impacts have been seen depressing immune responses of blue mussels and coral bleaching. There is impact on oceanic calcifying organisms also. Although the natural absorption of carbon dioxide by world's ocean helps mitigate the climatic effects of anthropogenic emissions of carbon dioxide, but it is believed that the resulting decrease in pH will have negative consequences, primarily for the ocean calcifying organisms. These span food chain from autotrophs and heterotrophs and include organisms. Many organisms, even the corals and mollusks are part of it, crustaceans also. So as I explained, under the normal conditions, what happened? The calcite and aragonite are stable in surface waters since the carbonate ion is at supersaturating concentrations. However, as the ocean's pH it falls, the concentration of carbonate ions required for saturation to occur increases when carbonate becomes undersaturated. Structures made of calcium carbonate are vulnerable to dissolution. Therefore, even if there is no change in the rate of calcification, the rate of dissolution of calcareous materials increases. So that is why these organisms suffer. They lost their calcifying mechanisms and the calcium shells. Now talking about its effect on reef fish. With the production of carbon dioxide from the burning of fossil fuels, oceans are becoming more acidic since carbon dioxide dissolves in water and forms acidic bicarbonate ion. This results in pH drop, which then causes corals to express their algae with which they have a symbiotic relationship, with causing the coral to eventually die due to lack of nutrients. Since these coral reefs are one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet, coral bleaching due to ocean acidification could result in major loss of habitat for many species of reef fish, resulting in increased predation and eventual endangered classification or extinction of countless species. This will ultimately decrease the overall diversity of fish in marine environments, which will cause many predators of reef fish to die off since their normal supply of food was cut off. If even here we talk about food webs in coral reefs will also be greatly impacted, because once a species goes extinct or is less prevalent, their natural predators will lose their primary food source, causing the food web to collapse in one itself, because every organism is dependent upon another organisms and there is interdependency also. So if at one level there is some disruption, whole food web will collapse. If such an extinction event occurred in our oceans, it will greatly affect humans since much of our food supply is reliant on fish and other marine animals. And talking about reef fish again, ocean acidification due to global warming will also change the reproductive cycles of reef fish who normally spawn during late spring and fall. On top of this, there will be increased mortality rate among the larvae of coral reef fish since the acidic environment slows down their development. Once a minimum temperature threshold is reached, the production of certain hormone synthesis increases significantly, causing the fish to produce mature egg and sperm cells. Spawning in the spring will have shortened period, while fall spawning will be delayed substantially. So ultimately, all this will affect the reproductive cycle of the reef fish also. Because of the increased carbon dioxide levels in the oceans from coral bleaching, there will be substantial decrease in number of young reef fish that survive to maturity. There is also evidence that shows that embryo and larval stage fish have not matured enough to express the appropriate levels of acid-base regulation that is present in adults. This will ultimately lead to hypoxia due to the Bohr effect driving oxygen off of hemoglobin. This will lead to increased mortality as well as impaired growth performance for fish in slightly acidic conditions relative to normal proportion of acid dissolved in marine water. So in short, ocean acidification is affecting the reef fish. If reef fish will be affected, the food web will get collapsed and many more repercussions will be seen in the biodiversity of the oceans. There are other biological impacts also. Aside from slowing and or reversing the calcification, organisms may suffer other adverse effects either indirectly through negative impacts or food resources or directly as reproductive or physiological effects. For example, increasing acidity has been observed to reduce metabolic rates. As I told you, in jumbo squid, it will depress the immune responses in the blue mussels and make it harder for the juvenile clownfish to tell apart the smells of non-predators and predators or hear the sounds of their predators. Also, increasing ocean acidity is believed to have a range of direct consequences. So, these are the direct consequences. This is possibly because ocean acidification may alter the acoustic properties of the seawater, allowing sound to propagate further and increase ocean noise also. This can impact many animals which use sound for communication. Atlantic long-fin squid eggs took longer to hatch in acidified water, and even the squids were smaller and malformed in animals placed in seawater with a lower pH. However, as with calcification, as yet there is not full understanding of these processes in marine organisms or ecosystem. Another possible effect would be an increase in red tide events, which could contribute to the accumulations of toxins in small organisms such as shellfish, in turn increasing occurrences of paralytic shellfish poisoning also. So these are the biological impact of ocean acidification. See, even the ocean warming and deoxygenation amplified the impact of These are amplifying the effect of ocean acidification, while the full implications of elevated carbon dioxide on marine ecosystems are still being documented. There is substantial body of research which shows that a combination of ocean acidification and elevated ocean temperature, driven mainly by carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emissions, have a compounded effect on marine life and the ocean environments. Now we will talk about non-biological impacts. Leaving aside direct biological effects, it is expected that ocean acidification in the future will lead to significant decrease in the burial of carbonate sediments for several centuries and even the dissolution of existing carbonate sediments. So this will cause an elevation of ocean alkalinity also, leading to the enhancement of ocean as a reservoir for carbon dioxide, with implication for climate change as more carbon dioxide leaves the atmosphere for the ocean. So this is not carbon, because CO is carbon monoxide. Here, because of the technical problem, 2 is here, so it is carbon dioxide. So as per non-biological impact on human industry could be seen. The threat of acidification, it includes decline in commercial fisheries, and in the Arctic tourism industry also an economy will be affected. Commercial fisheries are threatened because acidification harms calcifying organisms which form the base of Arctic food webs. Hence, the food webs, as I told earlier, would collapse. Pteropods, brittle stars, both from the base of Arctic food webs, and are both seriously damaged from acidification. These pteropods shells dissolve with increasing acidification, and the brittle stars lose muscle mass when regrowing appendages. For pteropods to create shells, they require aragonite, which is produced through carbonate ions and dissolved calcium. Now, pteropods are severely affected because increasing acidification levels have steadily decreased the amount of water supersaturated with carbonate which is needed for aragonite creation. Now, Arctic waters are changing so rapidly that they will become undersaturated with aragonite as early as 2019 or 20. Additionally, the brittle star's eggs die within a few days when exposed to expected conditions resulting from Arctic acidification. So, acidification threatens to destroy Arctic food webs from the base up. Arctic food webs are considered simple, meaning there are few steps in food chain from small organisms to the large organisms, or you can say large predators. For example, pteropods are a key prey item of a number of higher predators. Higher predators being planktons, fish, seabirds, whales. Both pteropods and sea stars serve as substantial food source, and their removal from the simple food web would pose a serious threat to the whole ecosystem because lot of organisms depend upon them for food. The effects on the calcifying organisms at the base of the food webs could potentially destroy the fisheries. So this is the impact on human industry. Then there could be an impact on indigenous peoples. Yeah, let me tell you one more thing here. For example, decrease in the growth of marine calcifiers such as American lobsters, ocean quagga or scallops means there is less shellfish meat available for sale and consumption. Even the red king crab fisheries are also at a serious threat because crabs are calcifiers and rely on carbonate ions. So whole thing here revolves around the carbonate ions and the calcifiers. If the calcifiers are being affected, it is affecting the biological species and the non-biological being the human industries also. Several ocean goods and services are likely to be undermined by future ocean acidification. Potentially, it could affect the livelihood of 400 to 800 million people depending upon emission scenario. Okay, now coming back to impact on indigenous people. See, acidification could damage Arctic tourism, economy also, and affect the way of life the people living there live. A major pillar of Arctic tourism is sport fishing and hunting industry. So it will be affected. The sport fishing industry is threatened by collapsing food webs, as I have explained, which provide food for the prized fish. So if there is no food for the predators are the prized fish, they will die and it will affect the sport fishing industry. So a decline in tourism lowers revenue input in the area and ultimately it threatens the economies that are increasingly dependent upon such kind of tourism. The rapid decrease in the disappearance of marine life could also affect the diet of the indigenous people because they also depend for their food on such animals or the marine animals. Now let's talk about the effects of acidification. The effects of ocean acidification can already be seen and have been happening since the start of industrial revolution as the pH levels of the ocean were dropping by 0.1. An effect called coral bleaching, as I already told you, can be seen in the Greater Barrier Reef in Australia. It is the largest coral reef formation there where ocean acidification effects are already taking place. So coral bleaching is when unicellular organisms that help make up the coral begin to die off and leave the coral, giving it a white appearance. Otherwise, the corals are very beautiful and multicolored organisms. These unicellular organisms are important for the coral to feed and get proper nutrition that is necessary to survive, leaving the coral weak and malnourished, and the other fishes which depends upon these corals also die out. This results in weaker coral. Increased acidity can also dissolve an organism's shell, threatening entire group of shellfish and zooplankton, in turn presenting a threat to the food chain and ecosystem. So just when the one trophic level is at danger, it is affecting, you can see in every lecture, the whole food chain is getting disrupted, food web is getting collapsed, and ultimately it is affecting the ecosystem, which we usually ignore. So ocean acidification can also have effects on marine fish larvae. It internally affects their olfactory systems, which is a crucial part for their development, especially in the beginning stage of their life. So even the orange clownfish larvae mostly live on oceanic reefs that are surrounded by vegetative islands. With the use of their sense of smell, larvae are also known to be able to detect the differences between reefs surrounding by vegetative islands and reefs not surrounded by the vegetative islands. Now even the oxygen depletion. Ocean deoxygenation is projected to increase hypoxia by 10% and triple suboxic waters. Oxygen concentration is 98% less than the mean surface concentration for each 1 degree of upper ocean warming. So ultimately it is also, there is a loss of biodiversity because of oxygen depletion also. Now talking about the marine life. The research indicates that increasing ocean temperatures are taking a toll on the marine ecosystem. A study on phytoplankton changes in the Indian Ocean, it indicates a decline of up to 20% in the marine phytoplanktons during the past 6 decades. During the summer, the Western Indian Ocean is home to one of the largest concentration of marine phytoplankton blooms in the world when compared to other oceans in the tropics. So increased warming in the Indian Ocean enhances ocean stratification, which prevents nutrient mixing in the euphotic zone where there is ample light available for photosynthesis. So all this is enhancing ocean acidification in return. So now talking about estuarine acidification. See, estuarine acidification happens when the pH balance of water in coastal marine ecosystem, specifically those of estuaries, decreases. Water generally considered neutral on the pH scale, normally perfectly balanced between alkalinity and acidity. While ocean acidification occurs due to ongoing decrease in the pH of Earth's ocean caused by because the oceans are ultimately absorbing the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But the pH change in estuaries is more complicated than the open ocean due to direct impacts from land runoff, human impact and coastal current dynamics. Now estuary is a place where the ocean and the river meets, that the transition point is known as estuary. So talking about ocean, it becomes very easy because we know they are absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. But what in case of estuaries? Because it becomes more complicated, because land runoff, they are also facing the land runoff, human impact and the coastal current dynamics also. See, in the ocean, wave and wind movement allows carbon dioxide to mix with water. CO2, it mixes with water forming carbonic acid, H2CO3. Through wave motion, this chemical bond is mixed up, allowing for the further break of the bond, eventually becoming carbonate CO3, which is basic and helps form shells for ocean creatures and 2 hydron molecules. This creates the potential for acidic threat since hydron ions readily bond with Lewis structure to form acidic bond. So this is referred as oxidation reduction reaction. So I will write it here. Just see what happens, how this reaction takes place. Carbon dioxide mixes with water, it forms your carbonic acid, then it becomes like this is HCO3 plus your hydron ions. Ultimately they are forming CO3, that is your carbonate, plus H positive ions are increasing, so ultimately your ocean acidification or estuarine acidification is increasing. So when this pattern of absorption is transferred into estuary, however, acidity increases simply due to relative volume. Ocean water counts for the absorption of 30 to 40% of carbon dioxide emitted into the atmosphere, and yet due to its immense volume it remains relatively resilient. Estuaries, being smaller in volume, sheltered from wave motion and victim to human impact when in an urban setting, do not readily support the mixing of water, and thereby it prevents basic breakdown. When this is combined with carbon dioxide from human impact such as car emissions or fertilizers, oxidation more readily occurs due to overabundance of hydron ions and additional cation, increasing the rate of occurrence, duration of acidification taking place. As the acidity of an estuary or estuarine water levels continues to fluctuate, several species who use estuaries as spawning nurseries have been decreases in their reproduction level. So ultimately all these things are affecting the animals and their reproductive activities. So there is the impact on the marine life which is visible. As the pH of marine system decreases, it causes calcium carbonate to dissociate. To keep in chemical equilibrium, calcium carbonate is vital to calcifying organisms. So this is all what we are discussing till now. So acidification is harming microorganisms in the environment. These organisms either directly provide humans with the food source or supports an ecosystem important to humans. So we can see how drastically the ecosystem is being harmed by such activities. Now if we talk about ocean deoxygenation. Ocean deoxygenation is expansion of oxygen minimum zones in the world oceans as consequence of anthropogenic emissions of carbon dioxide. So there is less oxygen. The change has been fairly rapid and poses a threat to fishes and other types of marine life as well as to the people who depend upon the marine life for their nutrition. Now oceanographers and others have discussed what phrase best describes the phenomena to non-specialists. Among the options considered were ocean suffocation, which was used in news also in May 2008, or even this is the same thing as hypoxia, marine deoxygenation, decline in ocean oxygen, or ocean oxygen deprivation. So everything is same, where the zones are being formed where there is very less oxygen available, and there are a lot of implication of these things. Ocean deoxygenation poses implication for the ocean productivity. It will reduce, nutrient cycle will be hampered, carbon cycling and marine habitats will be affected. Most of the excess heat from carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gas emission is absorbed by oceans. So oceans are actually helping us to absorb carbon dioxide, but too much of it in the oceans is harming itself. So warmer ocean cause deoxygenation both because oxygen is soluble in warmer water and through temperature driven stratification of ocean, which inhibits the production of oxygen from photosynthesis. See, not only are low levels of oxygen are lethal to fish and other upper trophic level species, they can change the microbially mediated cycling of globally important elements such as nitrogen. Nitrates replaces oxygen as the primary microbial electron acceptor at very low oxygen concentrations. All this increased demand on herbivores, decreased nutrient supply, decreased dissolved ocean, etc. It results in catastrophic food web mismatches. So till now we were talking about ocean acidification. Now we will turn to more global phenomena, that is coral bleaching. Although we were discussing it in examples, now see, the coral reef is an underwater ecosystem which is characterized by reef building corals. So corals are building reefs. So reefs are formed of colonies of coral polyps held together by calcium carbonate. So again, these are the calcifiers. Most coral reefs are built from stony corals whose polyps cluster in the groups. When polyps cluster in the groups, they form corals, and further these corals, they build up reefs. So these coral reefs deliver ecosystem services for tourism, fisheries and shoreline protection also. The annual global economic value of coral reef is estimated between, if we talk in US dollars, $30 to to 375 billion US dollars. So this is billion, 30 billion US dollars to 375 billion US dollars and 9.9 trillion US dollars. So coral reefs are fragile partly because they are sensitive to water conditions. They are under threat from excess nutrients, rising temperatures, oceanic acidification, overfishing, and etc. And even there's a country named as Palau who recently banned sunscreens there. So it is a small island country which banned sunscreens because in a study it was found that sunscreen is leading to coral bleaching. So they banned the sunscreen only. And even the Hawaii Island in US, it became the first state in US to ban sunscreen for the same reason. Now we will talk, after all, what is this coral bleaching. So coral bleaching occurs when coral polyps expel algae that live inside their tissues. Normally, coral polyps live in the endosymbiotic relationship with this algae, crucial for their health of the coral and the reef. The algae provides up to 90% of coral's energy. So, bleached corals continue to live but begin to starve after the bleaching. Now, above average seawater temperature caused by global warming is a leading cause of coral bleaching. So, according to UNEP, United Nations Environment Programme, between 2014 to 2016, the longest recorded global bleaching events killed coral on an unprecedented scale. In 2016, bleaching of coral on the Great Barrier Reef killed around 29 to 50% of reef's coral, and in 2017 the bleaching extended into central region of reef. The average interval between bleaching events has halved between 1980 to 2016. So what are the causes of this coral bleaching? See, the corals that form great reef ecosystem of tropical seas depend upon a symbiotic relationship, as I told you, with the algae-like single-celled flagellate protozoa called zooxanthellae. So this is the algae that live within their tissues and give the coral its coloration. So corals are very colored. So zooxanthellae provide the coral with nutrients also through photosynthesis. That is a crucial factor in the clear and nutrient poor tropical waters. In exchange, the coral provides, so this is a symbiotic relationship between the algae and the corals. So algae here is zooxanthellae. So in return, in exchange, the coral provide the zooxanthellae with the carbon dioxide and ammonium needed for photosynthesis. Negative environmental condition thwart the coral's ability to provide for the zooxanthellae needs. To ensure short-term survival, the coral polyps then expels the zooxanthellae. They tell them, you don't need to live with us. So this leads to a lighter or completely white appearance. Hence the term bleached is used. As the zooxanthellae, they provide up to 90% of the coral's energy needs through products of photosynthesis. After expelling, the coral may begin to starve. So coral can even survive short-term disturbances, but if the conditions that lead to the expulsion of zooxanthellae persist, the coral chances of survival totally diminishes. So in order to recover from the bleaching, the zooxanthellae have to re-enter the tissue of the coral polyps and restart its photosynthesis to sustain the coral as a whole and the ecosystem that depends upon it. But if the coral polyps die of starvation after bleaching, they will decay. The hard coral species will then leave behind their calcium carbonate skeletons, which will be taken over by algae, effectively blocking coral regrowth. Eventually, the coral skeletons will erode, causing the reef structure to collapse. So you can see how dangerous it is. But there are certain triggers for the coral bleaching also. Coral bleaching may be caused by number of factors. So as I told you, sunscreen was one of them which was causing coral bleaching. A recent research found, and 2 countries even banned it. While localized triggers lead to localized bleaching, the large-scale coral bleaching events of the recent years have been triggered by global warming. So global warming is one of the biggest reasons. So under increased carbon dioxide concentration expected in the 21st century, we are expecting that corals will become increasingly rare on reef systems. So coral reefs located in the warm shallow water with the low water flow have been more affected than reefs located in the areas with high water flow. So there is list of triggers also: global warming, overfishing, photosynthetically active radiation and ultraviolet light, increased sedimentation, bacterial infections, and the changes in the salinity. And even there are more to it also, herbicides being one of them. There is cyanide fishing also, elevated sea levels due to global warming, mineral dust. You can tell me in comment box many others also. And obviously the topic that we are discussing, ocean acidification, due to elevated levels of carbon dioxide caused by air pollution, they also cause coral bleaching. And there have been many mass bleaching events in the history also. Elevated seawater temperatures are the main cause of mass bleaching events. 60 major episodes of coral bleaching have occurred between 1979 to 1990, with the associated coral mortality affecting reefs in every part of the world. In 2016, the longest coral bleaching event was recorded. The longest and most destructive coral bleaching event was because of El Nino that occurred from 2014 to 17. During this time, over 70% of coral reefs around the world have become damaged. So yes, the triggers: herbicide, cyanide fishing, mineral dust, some more I have written in the next slide. I just skipped it. So now, mass bleaching events, as I told you, have taken place. Factors that influence the outcome of a bleaching event include stress resistance, which reduces bleaching tolerance to the absence of zooxanthellae, and how quickly new coral grows to replace the dead. Due to patchy nature of bleaching, local climatic conditions such as shade or stream of cooler water can reduce bleaching incidences also. Coral and zooxanthellae health and genetics also influence the bleaching. But however, as I told you, a lot of incidents have taken place here. So you can find them in writing also. So there is great impact of coral bleaching. In 2012 to 2040 period, coral reefs are expected to experience most frequent bleaching events. Even the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climatic Change, sees this as the greatest threat to the world's reef system. Second, coral abundance, which is the number of different living species on the coral reef. Within the increase of coral bleaching events worldwide, in 2017, National Geographic proposed in the past 3 years, 25 reefs, which comprise 3/4 of world reef system, experienced severe bleaching events in what scientists concluded was the worst ever consequence of the bleachings to date. So you can see coral reefs worldwide were lost by 19% to 60%, and the remaining reefs are at immediate risk of being lost. So this is kind of impact we are having on the ecosystem. So we should try to rebuild coral reefs. Research could be done. Research is being done to help slow down the mortality rate of corals. The population of coral is rapidly declining, so scientists are doing experiments in coral growth and research tanks to help replenish the population, and even awareness camps are being set up that what should be done by the society to help coral regrow and rebuild. Because there is economic value of coral reefs also. They provide shelter to estimate quarter of all ocean species. Experts estimate that coral reef services are worth up to $1.2 million per hectare, which translates to an average of $172 billion per year. The benefits of coral reefs include providing physical structures such as coastal shoreline protection, biotic services within and between ecosystems, biogeochemical services, etc. So there is cost benefit analysis that you can analyze of reducing loss of coral reefs. So what can be done in that case? The long time lags inherent in the marine carbon cycle put an added penalty on delaying limits on carbon dioxide emissions and a premium on early action if the worst damages associated with ocean acidifications are to be avoided. While climate change is a consequence of range of greenhouse gases emission, ocean acidification, it is primarily caused by increased concentration of atmospheric carbon dioxide. So The main source of all this is increased CO2 that is dissolved, that is absorbed then by the seawater. So the current emission targets need significant tightening if they are to tackle the issue of ocean acidification and ocean warming. We have to limit the global average temperature increase to well below 2 degrees Celsius rather than a lower level will significantly harm the ocean life on which we all depend in some form or another. Scientists even suggest that a healthy ocean needs an atmospheric carbon concentration of much less than 400 ppm parts per million. This benchmark has recently been exceeded also. So sustainable management, conservation and restoration of oceans are the need of the time. At the IUCN World Conservation Congress that took place in 2016, IUCN members approved of the resolution calling for the protection of 30% of planet's ocean by 2030. So even in the comment box, you can tell me what can be done to prevent ocean acidification and coral bleaching. How should governments work? How should society work? Thank you. That's all for today.